Welcome to Roguecast, the official podcast of Rogues Gallery and Round Rock, where we talk about games, comics, and other stuff on our pop cultural radar. I'm Randy.
I'm Nick.
This is Dave.
And we were on holiday hiatus. We apologize for those of you who have been starved for the Roguecast.
I don't apologize for nothing.
Dave apologizes for nothing.
I was partying. I mean, it was like a 40-day party. I don't know what you're talking about.
40 days? What kind of holidays do you celebrate?
It was a biblical thing, Randy.
Yeah.
40 days.
Nick starts way before things like
I do, no.
Right after Halloween, it's holiday time for Nick.
Well, it just got so crazy, we really wanted to record.
Yeah, actually we did.
Yeah, we did. We have a lot to talk about, but we just... December was crazy.
We had to take naps. We had to sleep at some point, as it turns out it was our podcasting time.
But so we are back, and we will have a show for you tonight, and that show is sort of fantasy themed.
Yep. We sort of have loose themes sometimes.
Sometimes.
We have no theme
sometimes
at all.
not.
I'm holding a sword.
Nick is holding a sword. He's in full warrior garb.
Yep. And you know what? I'm dressed as a wizard. They can't see me.
And I'm the princess you'll have to save.
Fair enough.
All right. You and pigtails. I like it.
So we're going to start with a game that Dave has sort of caught Dave's fancy lately.
An RPG.
An RPG.
The game is called The 13th Age. Now, this game came out, 6 months ago?
About,
or something like that? Maybe a little bit more. And on the surface level, it's kind of like one more D20 game. It sort of looked like a sort of old hat. I had heard good reviews on it, but I didn't really pay attention. Mm-hmm. I don't know quite what put it on my radar lately. I think one of our customers was talking about it, and I decided to give it a closer look, and found out that it was a more interesting melding, I guess, that I thought of sort of, D20. Specifically, it actually takes some of the principles of 4th edition.
Yep.
I know it's a dirty word in some parts, but I think a lot of people will acknowledge it had a fairly clean system and was maybe the most approachable the game has been, even if you don't feel like it represented D&D that well.
When 4th edition first hit, I started up a game and GM'd it. And
we all ran 4th edition.
Yeah, we all ran 4th edition, and I had actually new players who had never played D&D in their lives, and they were just so... They eased into it so well, and so there's something to be said about the approachableness of it.
So this takes 4th edition, drops a lot of stuff, honestly, and almost anything that had bookkeeping type elements to it, and melts it with indie concepts that might be more familiar to people who played, say, the Fate system
or Dungeon World, which we've talked about before.
Yeah, Dungeon World and things like that. Let me think of some examples. There's several things that makes the game unique. One of them is when you do character creation. There's a lot of stuff that sort of emphasizes story, and one of them is every character has what they call one unique thing. You could say, it could be as dramatic as I'm a dragon imprisoned in a halfling's body or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's not meant to be something that gives you a mechanical advantage, but it gives the GM all these story hooks and stuff to play around with later.
Okay.
So everybody chooses something like that. Instead of having skills... You use the relevant ability score just like you would in D&D, but everybody has 8 background points. And you can choose up to 3 backgrounds and put up to 5 points into each of them. Like, say, you could say, my guy was a shepherd, and then he was a man-at-arms for the king, and I put, 3 points into shepherd and 5 points into man-at-arms. If you make any skill type rolls that would invoke anything that you can make a reasonable case that those would affect, you would add your shepherd roll. Say you were talking to anybody out in the wilderness who might have a thing, have dealt with that, or you're dealing with animal handling,
or trying to spot a wolf,
Actually, tracking and stuff like that. I would imagine you could make a case for. And the game is very indie in the sense that it's not all nailed down like Pathfinder might be.
Okay.
Pathfinder is high on what they call, in the game terminology, crunch.
Yeah.
Pretty dense on rules for everything.
Yep.
Here they say, if the player makes a good case for it, let them give them how many points you put into it. That's your bonus for that roll. If you try and use 2 of the backgrounds at once, you can only pick the higher of them. But those are a few of its sort of basic indie-ish concepts.
Is it completely crunchless?
Not completely. It still has definitely the feel of D&D. You have hit points, you have an armor class, you have the traditional D&D abilities of strength, dex, and all that. And they're very upfront about it. It's actually written in this kind of colloquial style where they'll say, at one point, you can get a pet as a ranger, and they say, just use the wizard's familiar rules on page so-and-so. And they actually say something like, we know it's kind of cheesy to direct you to the wizard section for this, but we thought it was, less cheesy than printing it twice. And they'll actually say those things. Yeah. There's also all these asides from the 2 key designers, where they talk about, differences that they had. We argued over this, and, I feel like this rule, is, pretty important, but so-and-so runs more freewheeling games, and so he tends to not use it.
You mentioned the key designers. Who are the? I think there are 4 names on the cover.
There's 4 names on the cover. Jonathan Tweet, I think, is one of them.
Involved with a lot of stuff in game
Rob,
design.
I think, Heinzu.
Heinzu, who was very heavily at WotC, yeah.
Yeah, and there's 2 other names, Lee Moyer and Aaron McConnell, and I believe they're all heavily involved, but the notes are from Rob and Jonathan.
Okay.
So they must be the kind of the big
The
cats.
2 of those guys were big at Wizards of the Coast, I think, when 4th edition was being developed, and they're sort of high muckety mucks. They're kind of like Robin Laws, or the ones that role-playing gamers who keep track of game designers.
Names people might know, they're going to be kind of among them.
Yeah, it's a name you would probably know.
There's one other sort of big thing in here is what they call the icons. There's 13 icons that are kind of the big movers and players of their world. Think of them as the kings and queens and stuff like that, and they're sort of named in the generic. But there's like the Orc Lord, the Emperor, the Elf Queen, the Diabolist, who's like a demon woman kind of thing. Yeah. And when you create your character, you also take 3 points to start with, and you choose a relationship that's either positive, conflicted, or negative with them. And you put that 1, 2, or 3 points into 1 if you should want to.
Okay.
And then at the beginning of every given game, this encourages a kind of heavy, I guess I'd say, storytelling element.
Uh-huh.
Every player rolls as many dice as they have for those icons. So if you have 2 points in an icon, you roll 2 6-sided dice. If you have only 1 point, you roll 1. On a 5 or a 6, they're going to play a role in that story.
Okay.
A 6 means that they provide some immediate benefit. Not necessarily that character themselves, like the Elf Queen doesn't come and give you a magic sword, but somebody associated with her is going to play some role in the story.
Okay.
So it encourages a fairly improvisational element. They do suggest that people who are kind of not comfortable with being that improv-y, like I have a specific adventure planned out, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to incorporate the Dwarf King in this one, know. That you can have players roll at the end of a session and then work it into the next one.
Okay. Yeah.
But what it means is that I think everybody is going to kind of feel connected sort of with the world. They're going to feel like they have stakes in these things. They suggest possibly coming up with new icons if one of them should be overthrown or something like that.
That's kind of cool.
The world that they've given here is a somewhat generic fantasy world with some fun, unique elements, but it's not a startling world. They want it to feel D&D-ish.
Yeah.
I just want a quick question of, is there more than just this one book, or can a person come in and buy this and have everything they need to play?
This is one of the things that kind of lured me into it, is Player's Guide, DM's Guide, and Monster Manual all in one.
Yeah.
They are going to put out a separate Monster Manual that has like just more creatures, which I think all of which are going to be original.
Right.
And I think there's going to be some adventures. But and it even has an adventure in it.
Oh, okay.
So it's sort of this all-encompassing book.
Yep. For what is it, $40 or something like that? $44.95, which is about average for a hardcover these days.
Especially full color.
Yeah.
And the art's pretty nice in it. It's not up to like Pathfinder standards.
Sure, that's the gold standard.
But they also they're encouraging people to, in a weird way, it kind of fits their theme. They're like, if you want your dwarves to be a certain kind of style of dwarves, they can be that. If you want your dwarves to be more like they are in the Lord of the Rings movies, they can be that. Or they can, you can choose anything you want.
I want my dwarves to be 8 feet tall.
Might be a little iffy.
I like that they give you guidelines and you're able to sort of color outside the lines if you want, but make it your own setting.
I would say that's very much what they do, and that's why even they are in the beginning. I like how very upfront they are. They say, who's this for? They're like, if it's your first time game, they say yes, definitely it should go. You should be able to ease into it very quickly, but it's not good for first time DMs. They say,
okay,
because they feel like you are going to be having to make some more judgment calls that are not strictly rules related,
right?
And so they suggest that experienced DMs are going to have the best luck with it.
Okay,
to wrap it up, to throw a few things that they kept from 4th edition in there. The healing thing, where they have, I think they call it recoveries in this, but it works.
The healing surges.
Which I always liked.
It works roughly the same way. You sort of have powers, but they don't. It's not like near the number that they have in 4th edition.
Right.
This game generally says you don't need miniatures for it. Although it does matter if you're engaged with someone in combat, because there are some opportunity attacks and things like that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that has been a lot of the sort of specifics. I guess the battlefield coordination, the miniatures-esque elements are kind of dropped.
Okay.
What else? What else have they kept in there? I'm trying to think. What were the big things in 4th edition?
Well, powers.
Right. So, like I say, they have something. They have things like powers, but there's going to be fewer of them. But they're very flavorful. One of the ones I really liked when I made a few sample characters, there was a wizard one that's like, Vance's polysyllabic, manifestations or something like that. And this is a very role-play-y power and storyteller-y power. This is for people who like to kind of get into the fun of being a wizard. You're supposed to take all your wizard spells and rename them, or even come up with a few different names that are very much on the Doctor Strange by the hoary hosts of Hoggoth kind of. Or what are the demons?
Well, the old Tensor's floating disc. And,
yes, exactly. So, and they say like sort of the more loquacious and bombastic, the better. And then you get sort of some bonus effects that are sort of at the GM's discretion at them. They're not meant to provide big number crunching effects. They're not going to give you a +2 to your attack or something like that. But they might, if you had a particularly vivid description of a fireball or something like that, or a lightning bolt, they might allow that it might terrify some nearby orcs or something like that didn't get hit with it if you have a fun description. But it is, there's a lot of powers in there that I noticed that have role-play and storytelling flavors to them. They kept rituals, which in the sense that I think it's something that people didn't use often. It feels simpler here, where they say you can take any spell you've got, and if you come up with a non-combat application, the DM basically assigns a difficulty check and a time that it would take to do this. Like, it might be several hours, so you're not meant to do these on the fly. But if you can try and do this with sort of any spell you've got, and find a non-combat use for it. Using your chromatic, what is it, color spray or
color spray
to create some sort of giant sigil in the sky to to warn the town that the dragon is coming or something like that. I'm sure you can do that. But I've had a lot of fun building characters, and I'm looking forward to, at this point, trying it out soon.
Cool.
Right now, this is not. I haven't done an actual play on it.
Yeah, you just sort of read through.
Yep. But I was more excited than I thought I would be, especially because I thought, although I liked 4th edition, I didn't know that I really wanted to do more of that. It was still too crunchy for me, and too, some of the complaints about it being too MMO. I agreed with some of that. But this combines my love for indie-style game and mechanics-light stuff with some of the slickness of 4th edition.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So,
on another fantasy, but not a role-playing game, although there is a role-playing game, the Pathfinder card game has come out recently.
Yeah, we sat down and played this a couple weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah, a little while back.
You played it at least once.
And I've played it since. Basically, it's a card game. It's a deck-building game in some ways, something like Dominion or Marvel Legendary.
Comes in a sort of large box that looks like you're buying a board game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's based on Rise of the Runelords, which is the first adventure path that Pathfinder did, which is kind of neat in that you don't have to have played in the Pathfinder world at all, but if you have, you'll recognize some of the villains, and you'll know the characters are all what they call their iconic characters. So it's their fighter, their wizard, their sorcerer, and those are the characters you play.
Right, Valoros the fighter. All that, yeah.
And
Valoros.
What's kind of cool about it is that you set it up, everybody gets a character deck, and your character deck is each character card has a certain number of cards that you put together. So, say Valoros gets 5 weapons and no spells and 3 items,
Right. And you draw these randomly, right? If I'm right?
Well, at the beginning of the game, you set up, in the back of the rulebook, they have a standard setup for each character.
Okay.
And what you do is you get, so Valoros has, for example, like 2 long swords and a mace and a bow or something like that.
Yep.
And those will all become in handy as he plays.
Right.
And the wizards have a few spells that they can throw down.
Mm-hmm.
And your character class will give you the ability to use these better. So anyone can use a weapon, but Valoros, for example, when he uses a weapon, doesn't have to discard it. He could put it back in his deck.
Right. I remember feeling when we played very flavorful. Like I felt like I was a fighter.
It gives you the feel of playing Pathfinder. There's not quite that role playery thing. Like if you really like to get into the character and say the words and act it out, it's more of a combat-y type thing, but
it does suggest scenarios and situations, though. You're like, okay, while y'all are off tracking down the Lich King or whatever in the dungeons, Valoros is in town, which makes sense because he likes to go and drink at the tavern,
right?
And he's scouting for him there, and he gets jumped by some goblins, and you can sort of, if you want, you can sort of use these storytelling things to you can build it up a little.
Yeah, you'll get to a thing, and this is one of the other mechanics is that. To basically, the basic goal of the game is you'll have several locations, basically 5 to 8, depending on how many players you've got. And you go to each location, and it is a deck of cards. And when you encounter each turn, you'll go and pull a card. And the card could be a monster, it could be an item, it could be a spell. And if it's a monster, you fight it. If it's an item, you grab it. So, say you turn up, say, a weapon, like a bow. You have to make a dex check to acquire the bow.
Right.
If you fail, it goes back in the box and nobody gets it. If you succeed, you get to add it to your deck. So you get the sort of notion of I found a bow, but I tried to grab it and it slipped out of my grasp into the pond and it's lost. And that kind of stuff leads into storytelling as well.
Right. Right, there could have been a trap or something. Yeah, I got it off the skeleton of that was embedded in the spike's trap or something like that.
And there's
by the way, the way the board is set up is kind of neat. It's like the key locations are almost like there's like a star pattern.
It's sort of fanned out in front of you, and you put your your character goes to the different locations and encounters
like you actually put your character card on the card that has the location you're going to.
And then
it feels like there's a geography to the board, even though it's a card game.
And your goal is to basically find that there's a master villain in each encounter,
right? And
your goal is to find the master villain and trap him from running to the other locations, which you do by closing the locations, which has various different game mechanics. You do that, and basically, if you get 30 turns, which is measured by a deck that's the Blessings deck, and that sort of is a timer that you get every turn. And in those 30 turns, if you find and defeat the villain, then you win. If you don't, then you lose. And it's pretty simpler. If you win, and this I think is the really interesting thing, you sort of keep the characters in the box. You rebuild your character at the end with whatever items and stuff you've acquired.
Right, like Valeros is still only going to be able to have, say, 5 weapons.
But one of them might suddenly be like a +1 icy long spear instead of his base
Basically,
longsword.
the stuff that he's acquired during the course of the game, you could swap that out in favor of this, in place of the stuff that you began with.
Yeah.
It sort of mimics our traditional
leveling
RPGs.
up.
It mimics
leveling up.
And this is the thing that weirded me out at first. People kept telling me about this, and I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. I'm going to do my best to describe it. But basically, you think of it like, okay, well, if I'm going to play a card game, I don't want to go to the effort of playing something that I've played. I don't have to get people together every Thursday to play this card game. And it's not that. You don't have to have the same group. What it is the characters are built. So when next time you get together, whoever's there, you're like, okay, do you want the fighter? Well, here's the fighter. He has an extra weapon, and here's the wizard, and he has one extra. He gets one extra spell slot.
Right, like their deck is ready to roll.
Yeah,
and the way it's separated out in the actual box.
Yeah,
right?
the box is actually very well designed as far as where all the cards go. It's got room for all the expansions. Because here's the other thing, because they're basing on the adventure paths, it comes with 3 scenarios, and then the first adventure path is 6 more scenarios. So, barring any other changes, and every time you build it, the decks are going to be different. If you just want to play straight through, you'd have 9 separate sessions of the board game with no changes.
Yeah.
And then they do expansion packs that are 6 more scenarios, and the monsters get tougher. You get more magic items, that kind of thing. So it gives you the sense of leveling up, without having to put all the time in you have to do for an RPG campaign.
I mean, I know I'm sort of the opposite of when I play RPGs, I'm very much the role-play kind of geek.
Yeah.
But there are people who kind of prefer, a lot of people, maybe even the majority, who kind of prefer the hack and slash, fun of and kind of crunch of it all.
Yeah.
And now I really like the Pathfinder board game, but I think this is going to be a particularly good game, I think, for folks who like like say games like, what was that, Descent, who like the dungeon crawl type elements to it. Although that said, part of what intrigued me about this, and it was different depending on who you play with, is that if I had wanted it, we could have sort of expounded on the narrative stuff.
Sure, absolutely.
And there were times when we'd be in the same place, and my guy got beat up badly, and we imagine your guy coming in, with the nick of time with his paladin and his sword, and he takes down the guy who I had been fighting with, and it suggests a vengeance scene.
Yeah. Well, when I played with my other friends recently, we played the 6-player version, which
you have other friends?
I have other friends.
My God,
they're invisible. I played, and it was sort of funny that the cleric was sort of charging ahead, and the wizard was there with her, and she wound up stumbling into like a trap that exploded and did damage to him, and then a monster that attacked him. It was like the cleric was just bumbling along, and the wizard was just like, stop finding stuff.
Just setting off everything.
Yeah, it was sort of a great little... And like I say, it's in the narrative. The narrative is there if you want to play it that way.
Right. Well, when we played, I did get my ass beat down by, was it an Etten? Or something
like that. Maybe a zombie giant?
Something like that.
Yeah, I believe it was in there.
And you do a little bit of dice rolling in it, not a ton. But I had some unlucky rolls, and I got killed right near the end of it.
Yeah.
Randy and Nick, you guys leveled on and got your cool level up things while my corpse rotted.
That's actually, we rated your corpse.
Yeah,
that's
we
another
did rate your
mechanic.
corpse. That was
If your character...
D&D Pathfinder
Yes,
tradition.
I love this. If your character dies, you put all the cards you have in your deck, and at the end, when people are rebuilding, they just go through it. They're just like, oh, I could use that.
I feel like you should have to play a mourning card. But yeah, I was like, as I was watching y'all build your characters, I was like, it's a really cool mechanic whereby you kind of quasi level up.
Yeah. And
not too complicated, honestly.
No, it's really not.
When we heard about this, I think there was a little hesitation. We're like, yeah, we don't want to do the bookkeeping stuff.
Yeah.
We don't want to have to worry about it, and it's really easy to do.
Yeah.
And I think setup is fairly easy.
Setup is, I mean, it takes a little while to set up, but it's easy.
But I think once you get sort of in the repetition of it, and if you're playing it, more and more.
As far as overall complicatedness goes, I sort of middle of the road. I'd say for the game.
Yeah, it's not as simple as something that's like Carcassonne or one of those.
If you've never played any game but Monopoly, it's going to seem extremely complicated to you. If you've played any sort of the kind of games we carry, you're going to be able to ease into it pretty easily.
Especially if you've ever played Pathfinder. The group that I played with, there were some guys. There's a guy who has played a lot of sort of Pathfinder, but has not played much other gamer. He's not a gamer in general. And he was able to follow it all along very easily because it feels like Pathfinder. It feels like D&D.
Yeah.
It's a 1 to 4 player game. And then you can buy a character add-on pack that adds more classes that makes it up to 6 players.
Yeah. I think when I was a kid, my favorite, I liked the games that had a strong theme to them, so like Talisman and stuff like that. I think I would have been all over a game like this.
Oh, yeah.
Although I would have needed somebody to teach it to me. I was a dumb little kid, and I need somebody to teach me these things.
Yeah, I do think it's probably for the best if you have someone who has played Pathfinder at least. That'll give you a sense of the mechanics. But it's a good game. It's a lot of fun, and like I say, it's one of these things where there's a lot of possibilities to expand upon it. Like you get a ton of gameplay out of it.
Right. There's fun traps, fun monsters, all of that stuff. I mean, and it's beautiful looking.
And
all the cards are
well
amazing.
designed. The art's really nice.
You pretty much know when you're getting Pathfinder stuff, it's going to look beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So definitely recommended. That's one of my favorite new games from last year. Finally, in our fantasy themed, Dave was going to weigh in on a movie that neither Nick nor I have seen.
Yes.
And that movie is
The Hobbit.
Desolation of Smaug.
The Desolation of Smaug. I believe that's how it's pronounced in the original. Smaug. Desolation of Smaug. So I'll preface it by saying that pretty big fan of the original Lord of the Rings movies. Liked The Hobbit quite a bit, although it was a bit of the first one that was a step down from Lord of the Rings, but still good. This one crushed my spirit a little bit.
Okay.
The funny thing is, for the first half, I felt I was pretty much enjoying it.
Yeah.
And then, Peter Jackson does a thing. You remember King Kong, right?
Yep.
You remember that sequence where they're falling in that pit and
insects.
There's insects everywhere, and there's a T-Rex that got trapped in vines, and it's gliding back and forth.
Yep.
And you started to feel a little maybe weary, like the action, and it seemed like maybe the heroes kind of were just getting lucky, but weren't doing cool because they were really having to try hard. And my counterexample when I was talking about this on Facebook was in Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indy goes after the convoy of Nazis and he's on horseback.
Yeah.
He really struggles.
Yeah.
I mean, he works hard, he kicks their ass, but he gets beat up and almost gets killed any number of times.
Yep.
But it didn't feel like luck was saving him every time. It felt like it was his grit was saving him, and his ability to improvise. I felt like luck was saving him a whole lot in this movie, and I sort of started by near the end. I really started to tune out. I don't quite want to say too many spoilery things, but in the there's a big action sequence near the end with the dragon that was wholly invented.
Yeah,
and I by the end of it, I kind of didn't care. The dragon didn't seem like a big threat.
Yeah.
It actually, the realization that the dragon was going to storyline would continue into the next movie was kind of dispiriting. I felt like the audience at the end seemed to just feel tired. When they realized that there was still more dragon stuff to come and we weren't going to get to see the finale in this one.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like all the air left the room.
It's funny. I had someone who saw it tell me that seeing it in 3D in the theater, that it was almost like that sequence is like a ride. He's like, it's not good, but you sort of get it because it's like a ride.
Right, and there were several like this. I guess the closest I could compare it to, if you saw the first one, the fight in Goblin Town, where there's a lot of them running around on bridges, and then they fall, and then they're kind of all surfing on a piece of wood, and it happens to bounce just the right way to save them.
That was one of the scenes I checked out on really quickly.
Well, there's more of that in this one. And I know you're talking about the other Dave there.
Yep.
Not me. He was talking about the barrel scene, which of course in the book the dwarves and Hobbit just go down the river in barrels and they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Here there's a fight sequence and a chase sequence kind of involving that, and they're stuck up against the lock on the bridge where the elves are, and there's elves involved, and there's orcs attacking, and so there's lots of crazy stuff going on. And at one point, Bomber's barrel goes off to the side, and his arms pop out of it with like axes, and he kind of spins around like some sort of spinning blade thing and kills a bunch of goblins around him, and it's a little silly.
Okay.
I don't remember reading that.
I'm sorry I had to describe that. Now here's the thing. If you kind of are getting in, like I say, I see how he enjoyed that one, and that one wasn't even that overall egregious, except maybe that one scene.
Yeah.
But I understand they're going to deviate some from the books.
Sure.
That's a given.
Well, they have to. There's 3 movies in one book.
But yeah, I feel like you could have chopped 30 to 40 minutes off of this, had a tighter and better movie with better action scenes that I cared more about, and still kind of cheated in new stuff. Because I'll tell you, do you know that there's a female elf in it that's introduced? It's played by
Girl from Lost. Evangeline Lilly.
Evangeline Lilly. Right, and I ended up liking her character okay. It was purely invented character. Do you know the thing with her character?
Yeah, she's one of the Florin. It's one of the dwarves, right?
Yeah, but do you know kind of what her plot hook is?
No.
Nick, is she involved in with Legolas or
sort of? Do you mind a minor spoiler as far as premise? Legolas clearly has a thing for her, which is somewhat unrequited. And since these Peter Jackson dwarves have some handsome dwarves among them, she ends up forming a friendship, which is a hinted at romance with one of the dwarves.
Okay.
I think it's supposed to be kind of a... he did some of that more in the... in Lord of the Rings, there was a little bit more of a... can't we all get along than there is in the books.
Yeah.
Like the elves showing at Helm's Deep to help him in Lord of the Rings. That was not in the book. In the book, the elves are kind of going off to the Grey Havens, and they're all very sad. In the movie, they show up to stand by their dwarf brothers because it's a big crowd, rah-rah scene. And it was well done in the movie, but you're kind of like... It's a little heavy-handed. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's her plot hook. And it's actually handled all right. That stuff didn't particularly bother me. It was just those action scenes got wearying. Yeah. I was just kind of waiting for them to be done. Yeah. And you don't want to be that when you see an action movie.
Let me ask you this. Are you going to go see the third one?
I could say no in the immediate moment of disappointment, but I probably would. But let me tell you, I did not feel like it after I left the movie. Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm done with these movies.
Yeah. I checked out at the first Hobbit. I'm not a giant Hobbit fan.
Yeah.
I will watch it on Blu-ray.
I think that would probably be the better way to watch it. I've mentioned this to a few people, how the Pirates of the Caribbean movies get progressively more bloated? And they were already kind of bloated from the beginning.
Sure.
One time, though, I bought them all cheap somewhere, and...
Was it a pirate DVD?
From a pirate, Yar it was. And over the course of a week or two, I watched them all, and I'd watch an hour or an hour and a half each night, and I was just almost acting as if it was just a TV miniseries, and each night was more pirate adventure. And there were some episodes that were not quite as good as others, but, I would always cut it off at about an hour where some action scene ended. And I found the series much more palatable that way. Okay. I didn't really care about the bloated stuff. And maybe Lord of the Rings, maybe that could work for that, too. Watch it as a mini-series rather than a really bloated movie.
A mini-series that you could watch over the course of a month. Because they're 6 hours long each one.
It's true.
All right, that about wraps it up for this time. You can always give us your comments on the Facebook page and let us know what you thought of the show. And we will be back next week. Until that time, Yo Joe!